and welcome to my Booktube Newbie Tag. I didn't do this as my first video because I wanted to do a video talking more about books for my first video, which is why I did a vlog, but I did want to do this tag, and so that's what I'm going to do today. I've got the questions written down, so if I'm looking down, that's why. So the first question is, why did you start this channel? And the main reason is because I love books. Standard answer. I don't really have a lot of friends who read books. My family don't really read books. My partner doesn't really read books. So there's not many people in my real life that I can discuss books with. And I really like talking about the books that I love and telling people my thoughts, but it's kind of irrelevant telling people what you think of a book when they haven't read it and have no intention of reading it. So really this channel is just an opportunity for me to express my feelings about various books that I have read and which I've enjoyed or maybe not enjoyed. So question 2 is, what are some fun and unique things you can bring to Booktube? Now, I don't know so much about unique because there are so many channels on Booktube, but one thing I'm really interested in doing on my channel is read-along vlogs. So those will be where I vlog throughout the process of reading a book. So from beginning to end, I will vlog the process and let you guys know what I think as I'm going through the book. And I think that that will be quite interesting because more often than not, I will prefer a certain section of a book to the whole book in general. So I'm looking forward to posting some videos like that, and I am in the process of filming a read-along for A Conjuring of Light, which is the third book in the Shades of Magic series by V.E. Schwab. Another thing is that I find when I'm watching Booktube videos, more often than not, people say that they don't like either romance books, or more often than not they say that they don't like the romantic elements to other books. And I actually do like the romantic elements. It doesn't necessarily need to be the main part of the story. I particularly like fantasy books with a romantic element. I just like seeing the development of relationships between characters, and you tend to find that you see more romantic developments of relationships rather than sibling development or familial development or whatever. But I quite like that kind of storyline in a book, and so I think it will be quite nice to have a discussion about those kinds of things, because I haven't found any YouTubers that actually do like that kind of storyline. And two of my favourite series of all time are the Black Dagger Brotherhood series by J.R. Ward and the Lords of the Underworld series by Gina Showalter, and they are both fantasy series but with their base in romance, although there's still an overarching plot. I think each series is like around the 14 book mark. So yeah. Question 3, what are you most excited for about this new channel? And that kind of links in with the first question, in that I'm really looking forward to having discussions with people about the books that I love and that maybe you love too, or maybe you don't like them and I like them, or maybe I don't like them and you like them, and we can have a discussion, hopefully in the comments, about the books that we want to talk about. And it would be nice to make some friends who have similar book tastes to me so that I can spend even longer talking about books. Number 4, why do you love reading? So the reason I love reading is because it gives me an escape from my life, and I think that that's why my preference is for fantasy books. I've read the occasional contemporary book, but for the most part I tend to stick within the fantasy genre, and it is because I like to use reading as a way to escape from my everyday life and my everyday stresses and my everyday anxieties. So that is why I love to read. The next question, number 5, is, what book or series got you into reading? And honestly, I'm not 100% sure where it all started. I can't remember a time where I haven't been reading. I've been a reader throughout my life. The first full proper book that I can remember reading I have here, which is Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. And this is a super old copy. Like, I don't know if it's picking up on camera, but it should be cream. It's kind of gone yellow with age. But I remember my headmaster in my first year of primary school, so maybe when I was about 7, talking about reading books and how it's really good to read books, and how his daughter, I think it was, had just read a book and she was really sad when it ended. And that kind of inspired me to read by myself in my spare time, which I'd never really considered before. Usually in pre-primary school, nursery school even, so like age 3 to 5, you read books in class, like the teacher reads to you while you're learning to read. But I don't remember ever having taken the initiative before that to read for myself at home, so I'm pretty sure that this is the first book that I actually read cover to cover. And then in year 5, so I would have been maybe 9, I want to say 9, my teacher wouldn't let me read books with words in them. She only wanted me to read picture books because she didn't think that my reading level was high enough to pick. We had these boxes that you could pick books from, and they were labelled at different levels, and you were assigned, you had to go and pick a book from the box, and you then had to read that one next in that week, and then the following week you could pick a new book. And she wouldn't let me take a book from a box that the books had words in. She only wanted me to look at picture books, and I still to this day don't really understand why. It's not like, well, I'd read this already, which, yes, it's a children's book, but it's not, it is simple, of course, but it's still 140 odd pages, so I couldn't really understand why she wouldn't let me read, and I thought that it's because she thought that I couldn't. So I decided to pick up The Hobbit, which is a children's book, but it's pretty, I mean, this isn't the version that I read. I bought, well, I got given this, I think for Christmas or something, a few years later. I read a really tiny mass market version that was, the writing was really small, but even then, even though this is technically a children's book by J.R. Tolkien, sorry I didn't say that, it's not by any means simple, and I sort of challenged myself to read it. It was the most difficult book that I could find in the house at that point, my parents' house, and so I just decided to pick it up to prove to her and to myself that I was fully capable of reading a book. And I vividly remember reading this in quite a short period of time for somebody who was 8 years old. I think it took me like 2 weeks. I don't know, this was a long time ago, like nearly 20 years ago. But I vividly remember going into my teacher and handing her a copy of The Hobbit and saying, I have just read this, can I now please read some books with actual words in them? And I think she did from that point on let me pick books with actual words. So those are the first 2 like main books that I can remember reading. I do just want to talk briefly about some series that I read when I was younger. So the first series I can remember reading, this was in between year 5 and, no, it was between year 6 and year 7, so I would have been 10, 11-ish. I read his Dark Materials, so I think I started with the Northern Lights, of course, and then I'd only been intending on reading this one book, and I enjoyed it so much that I then read The Subtle Knife and The Amber Spyglass, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's pretty classic. I think most people have read his Dark Materials, but if you don't know what it's about, it's set in a fantasy world where people have demons, and demons are kind of, I suppose, like somebody's subconscious, but they're a creature and they live outside of your body and you can talk to them. And while the people in this world are children. Their demons can change forms between various animals, and when the people become adults, the demons will choose a form and will stay in that form for the rest of that person's life. And there's this whole thing about dust, and dust is this substance that sort of predominates the novels, and the novels are based on figuring out what dust is and what it does and why it is that children's demons change form but adults don't. And to be honest, it's been a very, very long time since I read these books, so I don't really remember much more than that, but I don't think I'd want to tell you more than that anyway. The main thing I remember about these books is I think it's at the end of book 2, something happens and I cried a lot. I'm not going to tell you what it was because spoilers, but yeah, I cried a lot. Another series that I want to talk about is the Wind Singer series, or the Wind on Fire series actually, sorry, trilogy. So the first book is The Wind Singer, the second is Slaves of the Mastery, and the third is Fire Song. I don't remember exactly when I read these. I was definitely in school. Maybe I was around 12 or 13, but the first book was actually required reading for my English class. And I enjoyed it so much that I went on to read the rest of the series, and it's kind of got a really creepy plot, and I don't remember much about it, so I'm actually just going to read you the blurb, which says, "I hate school, I hate ratings, I won't reach higher, I won't strive harder, I won't make tomorrow better than today, Pongo to exams. In the walled city of Aramanth, exams are everything. When Kestrel Hath dares to rebel, the chief examiner humiliates her father and sentences the whole family to the harshest punishment. Desperate to save them, Kestrel learns the secret of the Wind Singer, and she and her twin brother Bowman set out on a terrifying journey to the true source of evil that grips Aramanth." And it is pretty, dark for a children's book series, I think. I remember being quite creeped out by certain sections of that story. And then, so those are the first 2 trilogies I remember reading, and then the first series I remember reading, i.e. more than 3 books, they're very, very short, are the Mediator books by Meg Cabot, and I was obsessed with these in my early teen years, and I must have read them, God, I don't know, several times, and there is a romantic plot line in these, so there you go, that's what I was saying before. So I really, really enjoyed those. Basically, it's about a girl who can see ghosts, and she has to try and help them move on to the afterlife. So that's quite nice. The first high fantasy series that I can remember reading. Now, obviously, I read Harry Potter, loved Harry Potter, but everybody has spoken about Harry Potter, everybody loves Harry Potter, so I'm not going to go there, because you'll be bored because you've heard it all before. But I did read and love Harry Potter. I did also read and love Twilight at the time. Now that I'm older, I can see the issues with the book, but at the time, when I was in my early teen years, I really enjoyed them. But the first proper high fantasy series that I read when I was probably around 15, 16 was The Symphony of Ages by Elizabeth Haydn. And the reason I wanted to mention this book is because I never hear anybody talking about these series. No one. I've never met, I know one person who's read this series, and it was the person that introduced me to it, but other than that I've never ever heard anybody mention this series, and if I ever bring it up with anybody, they haven't got a clue what I'm talking about. And actually they're really difficult to get hold of. You can pretty much only buy them secondhand. I don't know if they're out of print or what, but yeah, they're not very popular, I guess, but I love them. Because it's high fantasy, it's really, really difficult to tell you what they're about without spoilers, but essentially the main character is a girl named Rhapsody, and she meets these two men, a Drassian and a Firbolg, which are types of beings in this fantastical world, and they go on a journey together, and there's lots of magic and politics and basically all the good stuff that goes into a high fantasy series is in this series, and I would highly recommend it. Is the writing the best? No. But is the story great? Absolutely. I love this series, and maybe there's a nostalgic element to it as well because it's the first high fantasy series that I read, but honestly I would highly recommend. I really love this series. There's 9 books in the series now, although I've actually only read 6 because when I read them that's how many were out, and since then 3 more have come out, and basically I lent my copies to somebody and never got them back, so I waited 10 years before rereading these this year, and I'm currently reading the 4th book. Number 6, what questions would you ask your favourite booktubers? I really don't know how to answer this question because I'd probably just want to have a discussion with them about their favourite books. Number 7, what challenges do you think starting a booktube channel will be the hardest to overcome? So aside from scheduling, which I do anticipate being a little bit difficult, particularly because I don't have any fancy equipment, so lighting will be an issue. Right now I'm using natural light, but it's a pretty grey day, so I don't know how that's going to turn out. It looks okay on my phone screen, but I guess I'll find out in due course. And also I have a really busy full-time job, so scheduling is going to be a challenge, but I think the biggest challenge for me is going to be the editing, because I'm useless at it, if I'm being honest. I'm sure I'll learn, but as of right now, utterly useless, so sorry for that. Number 8, when did you start reading? And as I said earlier, I honestly can't remember a time where I wasn't reading, and I've already spoken to you about the books that I started off with. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the books that got me back into reading. Basically, while I was at university, I had so much reading to do for uni that I just totally got out of the habit of reading and basically didn't read anything for like 3 years. So I wanted to discuss the series that got me back into reading after that 3-year-long reading slump, and that is the Black Magician trilogy by Trudy Canavan, which starts with The Magician's Guild, and then it's The Novice, and then it's The High Lord. And I remember reading this. This was the first series I read in my 3rd year of uni when I was getting back into reading, and I absolutely loved it. It's about now again, I've reread this many times, but not for a few years. So it follows a girl named Sonia who's from the slums, essentially. I don't think it's called that in this book, but she's from the slums, and she discovers that she has magic, and it completely changes her life. And the first book pretty much is her discovering her powers and joining a school for magicians, and then the second book deals with lots of intrigue at the school, and she continues to develop. And I'm not going to talk about the 3rd book because major spoilers for books 1 and 2 if I did. But honestly, I absolutely love this series, and if I'm going to recommend a series, if you pick up one series from this video, make it this one. The Black Magician trilogy is fantastic. I also, shortly after finishing the Black Magician trilogy, read The Hunger Games, and again, many people have discussed that series on Booktube. It's amazing, everybody loves it for a reason. It is fantastic, and I devoured it very quickly and reread it many times afterwards. The same, I'm a massive rereader. I love rereading, although I haven't actually done any rereading this year. Number 9 is, where do you read? Where do I read? I read basically everywhere and anywhere. Most of all, I read while I'm travelling to and from work, so on my morning and evening commute. I also read on the sofa, I read in bed. I pretty much always have a book with me, so anytime I get a minute or two spare, I am reading. So the answer to that question is anywhere, except maybe outside, but that's just, I don't really like sitting outside and doing anything other than like maybe sunbathing on a beach, in which case I would be reading. Number 10, which is the final question, what kinds of books do you like to read? And kind of touched on this a little bit already as well, but I love fantasy. It's basically all I read. I'm obsessed with fantastical worlds. I love magic systems. I do like a little bit of a romantic plot line thrown in there. I don't read many other types of books, to be honest. I'm not a very broad reader, it has to be said. I do read some contemporary sometimes, and possibly the odd non-fiction. For example, earlier in the year I read This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay, which is non-fiction, a diary of a junior doctor. But otherwise, yeah, it's basically just fantasy because I love it, and I'm sort of like, well, why would I read anything else when I know what I love? I know that's not very cultured of me, but you know, it's what I enjoy. I'll try and broaden my horizons for you though. But that's it. That's all of the questions in the Booktube Newbie Tag. So hopefully this has given you a little bit more of an insight into me and who I am and what my book tastes are. If you were interested in any of the books that I discussed, or you want to see more content from me, then do click that subscribe button and leave me a comment in the comments down below telling me what your first book was, or what your favourite book was, or even what you're currently reading. I'd love to have a chat with you, and I look forward to seeing you again. Bye!